today's event is exploring socioscientific issues in language classrooms. Before we get started with the main event, I have just a couple of announcements and pieces of information. The first is, if you're new to our webinars, I wanted to introduce us. My name is Chantal Warner. I'm one of the two co-directors along with Beatrice Dupuis of Circle. And I'm here today with Kate Mackay, who's our associate director, and Xochitl Coronado Vargas, who's our outreach coordinator. And so Circle stands for the Center for Educational Resources in Culture, Language, and Literacy. We are one of 16 language resource centers, national language resource centers funded by the Department of Education. And we are housed at the University of Arizona in the College of Humanities. So if you are new to us, do make sure to check out our website. We have a number of other professional development opportunities and open educational resources and other things that help us to fulfill our mission of supporting language education in the US and all around the world. And then we also encourage you to check out the other centers because we all do slightly different kinds of work and do a lot of collaboration together. Before we move forward too, we also wanted to recognize that today is June 19th, and this is the last time we will ever be hosting an event on June 19th because it was just recently recognized as a national federal holiday in the US in recognition of the fact that June 19th was the last day where enslaved people in the US were freed. And so like the rest of the country, we are learning, and as we learn better, we'll do better. But we did want to recognize this event. And part of our learning process has also been compiling a set of resources that are focused on social justice and anti-racist pedagogies. This is like a clearinghouse for other people's work. So if you do work in this area, or if you know of people who are doing amazing work that relates to anti-racist pedagogy and language education, please do email us and share those, and we will get them added to the site. And if this is something you're interested in, we encourage you to check it out. There's a lot of amazing resources there. We have a couple of upcoming events that we also wanted to mention. This is the last of our summer webinar series, but we will start back up in the fall. So September 29th is our first of the fall webinar series. So the registration won't be open for that until fall, but we want you to be able to save the date if you're interested. And we'll be starting with a two-part series on artificial intelligence. The first will be Google Translate instructional strategies for machine translation in the language classroom. I know that's something that many of us are trying to figure out how to do right in our classrooms. So we'll hear from Emily Helmick and Kimberly Vinall, who've been doing a project that's related to that. And then we'll have a second talk, Devices, Designs, and Algorithms, Strategies for Integrating Critical Digital Literacy in the Language Classroom by Ron Darvin, which will also is about finding smart ways to deal with all of these new technologies that are coming that support language use and language education. So we're excited about that and hope to see many of you there. We also have upcoming in January our intercultural competence conference that we hold every 2 years. The focus this time is on decentering mobility and intercultural education. The call for papers ends in just 2 days. So if you're interested in presenting, please get that in here in the next couple of days. But even if you're not interested in or able to present, there'll be lots of opportunities for both in-person and remote participation. So go ahead to the website and check that out. All right, that is all my announcements. So at this point, we're going to move to our main event for today, exploring socioscientific issues in language classrooms. We have a panel of wonderful presenters. They're going to introduce themselves so that they can tell you a little bit about how they each contributed to this project that they've been working on together with Circle that figures out how to highlight socioscientific issues in a way that really meaningfully integrates language education and STEM. So I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to steal their thunder, but please join me in welcoming our group of panelists for today's webinar.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. To share our experiences of implementing social scientific issues in language classrooms, today's webinar will introduce what social scientific issue means, why we wanted to bring this concept used in science education into language classrooms, and how we made it possible through our 3 social scientific issue projects on Western Eastern medicines, COVID-19, and eco-friendly travel, as well as a spin-off project, guided use of machine translation. Then we will introduce our instructor manual on COVID-19 and eco-friendly travel so that you can have some concrete references to refer to when you implement social scientific issues in your own classrooms. We will also introduce our archive of socio-scientific issues found in Korean media and discourses as an example. You can archive similar resources in the language that you teach. Then we will have a Q&A session. Please make sure to post your questions to the Q&A menu so that we can answer your questions during as well as at the end of the webinar. As the very first step of our webinar, let me introduce each of our 6 team members. With whom we work often determines what we can do. Each of our team members' specialties have played important roles in what we have been able to do through our SSI projects. The introduction of our team will also offer you the context of this interdisciplinary project and its components. Let me start with myself. My name is Sunyoung Yang. I'm a cultural anthropologist as well as assistant professor of the Department of East Asian Studies. I have directed the Korean language program in my department. My research interests are mainly in technologies and society. To cultural anthropologists, languages are always very important parts of cultures. Cultures are very important in language education as well, which I thought it could be a strength for a language program that a cultural anthropologist directs. For me, classrooms are always everyday field size. So directing a language program has been very interesting for me. The University of Arizona had offered Korean language courses through the critical language program before I joined East Asian Studies. Dr. Jieun Ryu is the one that developed the initial Korean language curricula at our university during her PhD period in SLAT. Her research interests encompass technology in second language teaching and learning, less commonly taught language pedagogy, and self-directed learning. She developed the Korean language curricula while fully utilizing her training in SLAT. Our current Korean language program has built upon Jieun's curricula and benefited from her years of experience. After finishing her PhD, Jieun has worked as a director of the critical language program at our university and continues to collaborate with the East Asian Studies for Korean language programs, such as a Youth Korean Summer Camp, which Jieun and Sojung just successfully finished last week. Our project with the circle, however, could have been something else if Dr. Seungmin Eum hadn't joined us. Seungmin came to the University of Arizona as a research scientist in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry right after she finished her PhD in STEM education at the University of Georgia in 2017. She already had experience in developing curricula for socio-scientific issues, not only for science classes, but also for Korean language courses at UGA. When Seungmin proposed to develop similar curricula for our Korean language program together, it sounded like a plan to relate my research interest in technologies and society to directing the Korean language program. That's how our project, SSI in language classrooms, started. Seungmin's research interests are teacher education, formative assessment, and integration of socio-scientific issues in STEM, as well as language learning. Her interdisciplinary capability and project experiences have led her to her current job as an assistant professor at the Defense Language Institute Foreign Language Center. I can't think of anyone better than Seungmin who can bring STEM education to language curricula. Neither Seungmin nor I specialized in language education, so we invited Jieun to join us. But without our Korean instructors, this project wouldn't have been possible. Sojung is one of the 3 Korean instructors of our team. Sojung is a full-time Korean instructor of EAS with a training in language education and history. She taught Korean at the critical language program at our university, as well as Tendler Elementary School and Sabino High School for 8 years before joining EAS full-time. Sojung has extensive experience of teaching Korean at different levels of K-16. Her language teaching has been based on hands-on project-based learning, so her classrooms are always so active. That's why Sojung has been willing to experiment with the socio-scientific issues in our Korean classrooms. Seungmin is a PhD student in SLAT. His research interests are syntax, sentence processing, and L2 sentence development. But his broad research and teaching interests encompass multiliteracy and technology-enhanced language learning. When Seungmin first joined our Korean program as a graduate student instructor, he already had 8 years of experience teaching Korean to people from a wide variety of backgrounds, including international students in South Korea, students in the US, foreign workers, immigrant women married to Koreans, and refugees from Africa. His teaching experiences both in South Korea and the US, as well as the diversity of his students, have enabled him to become an outstanding educator, as well as a researcher of Korean as a second language. He has contributed to our project from SSI research to curriculum development, teaching, and assessment. Seojin is a PhD candidate in SLAT. As a sociolinguist, her research interests are in second language learning, teaching of minority groups, such as refugees and immigrants. For her PhD dissertation, Seojin is conducting research on North Korean refugee students' experiences as English learners and reconstruction of their English learner identities in relation to various ideologies in South Korea. Because of her research interest, she has a particular interest in the identity constructions of our students as second language learners, as well as our team of Korean teachers. Her previous teaching experience of English as a second language also benefits our students when she joined our Korean program as a graduate student instructor. Let me stop here and let the other team members present about our project. We did our best to share our 3-year hard work with you through this webinar, instructor manual, and a sample archive of socio-scientific issues. You don't need to worry, even if you don't have a team like ours, since we are going to be your team from now on through these resources we are going to share. I'm handing over the baton to Young-ae.
All right. Hi, everyone. Let me help you delve into this concept of social scientific issue first. STEM education has been more and more important and emphasized in many different sectors because the development of our society heavily relies on STEM. STEM is deeply related to the complex global issues such as energy, global warming, environmental issues, which can be addressed by the integration of knowledge and skills of multiple disciplines in STEM as well as non-STEM fields. Moreover, STEM issues and everyday life cannot be separated because, well, look at us. We were going to have this webinar in person at Circle Summer Institute, but due to this pandemic, we are meeting online from around the globe. Social scientific issues have been termed by Sadler to emphasize the connection between science and society in STEM education. SSI can serve as meaningful context in STEM curriculum as SSI situates learners to solve real-world problems in an integrated manner. SSI are controversial social issues related to science, which are ill-structured, open-ended problems with multiple solutions. The examples of SSI are cloning, genetically modified organisms, the use of nuclear fuel, global warming, and so on. See, they are all closely related to our everyday life. So why SSI? What are the implications of bringing SSI into language classrooms? We already answered these questions. Science and technology are deeply rooted in our everyday lives. So students can and should learn Korean in authentic contemporary Korean context, and those contexts are conveyed by science and technology. When we teach target language, we also teach cultures of the given communities. If science and technology are social and rooted in our everyday lives, they are also important components of our cultures. Different societies respond differently to the same technology. For example, we witness how different societies responded differently to a virus called COVID-19 and wearing a mask as a response to this virus. That's why we strongly feel the need to bring SSI to our language classrooms. Another good example is fine dust. Fine dust in Korea has affected Koreans' everyday life. If our students go to Korea, they will hear this word fine dust frequently in everyday conversation, news report, or even through mobile apps. Exploring fine dust with our students can be a good way of learning Korean as well as Korean culture on top of working on SSI in Korean classrooms. At this time, we would like to pause and take 2 minutes to brainstorm possible SSI topics you can use in your classroom. Please use the link in the chat to go to our Padlet page and share your ideas. Okay, here is the Padlet page. And please answer these questions. What kinds of SSI topics do you think applicable to your curriculum? Okay, great. Flu and health issues, global warming, racism, 네, yes. Cybersecurity, yes. AI, artificial intelligence, vaccine response, and availability. Yes, food and hunger. Many interesting ideas coming up. Technology in teaching. Yes, caregiving robots. Yes. Diversity. Yes, biodiversity. And equity issues. Wow. Yes, environmental issues and immigration. All those tiles are moving up. All right. Okay, all these ideas, you already got these all good ideas, and all these fascinating ideas are good candidates for SSI projects for your language classes. All right. Okay. In addition to exploring SSI as a part of target language and cultures, we can also benefit from SSI reasoning. There are SSI reasoning skills that students can develop when engaging in SSI projects. First, the complexity of SSI. SSI has complex, contextual, and multiple factors. For example, scientific, socio-economic, political, geographical, and cultural context. Second, multiple perspectives. SSI has various and well-reasoned positions by interested parties. For example, governors, experts, educators, social workers, or personal views. Third, inquiry. SSI are subject to ongoing investigation with multiple solutions to the issues. Fourth, skepticism. SSI has contradictions or conflicts among stakeholders, and students can employ skepticism in the review of information presented by different parties. Finally, SSI requires decision-making and highlights morality and ethics in the negotiation of the issues. By engaging in our project, we wanted our students to improve Korean language skills more critically through advanced SSI reasoning.
Hi. The next part is the application of SSI content in a language classroom. And this project was our first try. So we also had a lot of questions about how to integrate SSI content, reasoning components demanded in STEM fields. and language skills that are required in foreign language classrooms. I'm going to explain the structure of the project and why we decided to include specific activities. I'm also going to share some challenges we had as we implemented this project. The title was Western and Eastern Medicines, which was conducted in fall 2019. Here is the class information. There were 2 sections of Korean 201 and a total of 43 students participated in. 23 students in one section and 20 in another. The class mode was in person and it was a 15-minute class each time. Activities were designed for 13 class times every Friday from the second week of the semester. Tech tools were used during the class and for the final project, such as Google Slides, webcams, and video making software. We set learning objectives for the project under 2 categories. One category was about SSI content learning for Western and Eastern medicines and about practicing SSI reasoning. Another category was linked to situated learning, emphasizing individualization and internalization in language use. Under the category of the SSI content knowledge and SSI reasoning, there were 3 specific goals to recognize different viewpoints between Western and Eastern medicine approaches to diseases like a cold, and to practice SSI reasoning in our daily life decision-making situations, and to acquire and use Korean medical vocabulary. Under the situated learning objectives, there were 2 specific goals: to acquire everyday knowledge related to hospital and health information, dealing with a doctor profile, symptoms, preventative measures, folk remedies, and so on. The other goal is to use grammar items and words learned during the regular classes under approachable situations, such as introducing a clinic location and creating an introduction video. This is the sequence of the project. It was formed in 3 stages, which were intertwined with each other. Introduction with K-drama cliche, small discussions and samples. Next, research and language learning on 2 topics followed. One was situated learning, focused with the topic of the doctor's office, and another, a specific topic focused, a code containing research about Western, Eastern approaches to it. Throughout the class activities, we incorporated authentic materials. Then finally, product finalization and submission. In the following slides, I will briefly show you the students' activity samples. Here are worksheets. The first worksheet is a vocab research table. The second one is a doctor profile with questions. The third one is a research worksheet for a typical medical school system in Korea. On the left again, this is a worksheet for directions. And on the right is a student's work on selecting their doctor's office location. There was a research activity under the topic Western Eastern medicines. This is a sample from an Eastern medicine group. Another one is a Western medicine group sample. For the final project, the instructors provided a guideline containing an outline, requirements, grading scale, and guiding questions. Here are grammar elements needed to be included and guiding questions to consider. This is a final product sample, doctor's YouTube video. Let's watch this for a minute.
여기서 그거에 어떻게 가요? 4번 대지역 출구 퇴장해요. 왼쪽으로 삼성으로 도세요. 그리고 버스 정류장에 가요. 병원은 버스 종류장 뒤에 있어요.
As final day activities, students gave presentations and participated in SSI discussion. SSI discussions were developed to revisit SSI topics and wrap up with SSI reasoning practice. Students had an English discussion with the suggested questions such as, why do you think people eat that kind of food for cold? What do you think about these kind of common treatments for different symptoms? Why do you think that people believe vitamin C can help prevent or treat the common cold, and so on? After our first semester of the SSI project, we learned the lessons worth to share with other language instructors. I may point out some benefits and unexpected points in relation to class activities. Each activity was integrated into the two final products, a doctor's YouTube video and Facebook homepage. In this way, the project can flow coherently from the beginning to the end. Next, the use of authentic materials contributed to improvements of students' practical language skills. However, in the early stage of the project, they needed more time to get used to unprocessed raw materials than expected. So it caused us to revise the time plan of each lesson to finalize one activity and move on to the next. Also, there was a certain kind of gap in terms of the required level of skills and demands between activities on regular class days based on a traditional textbook and on the day of the weekly project. Regarding SSI integration into L2 classrooms in general, I may say SSI topics surround us. As a suggestion, it would be easier to find topics and activities and in a textbook. In our case, the topic of Western and Eastern medicines was from one of the chapters in our textbook. We also learned that instructors collaborating with students could have a power to control the integration levels of SSI components into language learning. For example, as you have seen our first case, SSI in an L2 classroom looked more like a typical language classroom, bringing in SSI relevant topics from a textbook, and mainly dealing with SSI terms and relevant expressions in the target language. Or you can go further into exploring SSI reasoning aspects required in STEM education, such as different perspective taking and decision-making components. Even multimodality can be combined with it, reflecting how students' reflections and reasonings are embodied in their products. You will be able to have more senses about what I'm saying from case 2 and case 3. They are coming up. Lastly, I'd like to give you a practical issue to think about. If you will implement an SSI project in your language classroom, which one would you take? A semester-long weekly project or an intensive final week project? Alternatively, I may ask which way would be more beneficial for students considering various aspects of student side, such as language improvement, topic fatigue, and so on. I hope you have your own idea after the presentation of all of the 3 project cases. Please consider the next 2 cases with different nuances and levels of the SSI in L2 classes.
The second topic of our SSI project was COVID-19. For spring 2020, we were planning to do eco-friendly travel as our topic. However, we all know what happened in spring 2020. COVID-19 hit, and it quickly became the most urgent and important issue in our lives. As a response, we put aside all the curriculum and materials we developed for eco-friendly travel and developed a new SSI project curriculum, COVID-19 pandemic, right after the outbreak because it shows how deeply SSI is embedded in our everyday lives. It was a lot of work, not gonna lie, but worth our time since everyone in our classrooms were affected by the pandemic. So the pandemic became our common ground for this SSI project. Since there were 11 days of SSI project work planned for the very end of the semester, we could successfully develop entire lesson plans and materials before the project week started. We developed the curriculum through teaching 2 semesters, and in this presentation, I'll share the curriculum we implemented in fall 2020. So this project was for Korean 201 students, and there were 2 different sections of 25 and 23 students. We also had to change the teaching mode to online and develop the lesson plans accordingly. There were a total of 11 classes, including project preparation and presentation days. And during the class, we used different technological tools such as Google Slides and Google Doc. For the entire COVID-19 project weeks, our desired learning outcome was to have students reflect their knowledge of COVID-19 as an SSI, develop their L2 skills and strategies related to the issue, recognize scientific evidence behind COVID-19 practices, interpret COVID-19 practices as cultural product, apply SSI decision-making practices, and finally, create a meme as a socio-cultural product related to COVID-19, which was our final project. And here's the roadmap of the project we developed to meet the learning objectives that I mentioned. We started with an introduction to SSI-based language learning and vocabulary and expression learning on day 2. On day 3 and 4, students looked at the scientific evidence of COVID-19 practices such as social distancing and wearing a mask. And they also had some time to discuss them as cultural practices as well. On day 6, we focus more on practicing decision-making processes, which is one of the core elements of SSI learning. And I'll show you how we actually implemented this decision-making practices as an activity on the next slide. And finally, students prepared and presented their final project, which was creating a meme related to COVID-19. A detailed explanation and student samples of the final project will be also shared soon in this presentation. So as you all know, COVID-19 is not an easy topic. So to help students delve into the topic and SSI learning and discussion, we used both English and Korean to do different activities in class. And depending on the focus of the activity and the level of the students, we carefully chose which language to use more than the other. So for example, in this activity where students were asked to practice decision-making processes regarding SSI, we decided to use English more. Students were asked to read the scenario where they become store managers of the supermarket and create safe shopping guidelines considering different stakeholders' demands and perspectives. And after they wrote an essay, students were asked to reflect on their own essays with the lens of 4 SSI elements, which were complexity, multiple perspectives, inquiry, and skepticism. This activity helped students not only to recognize and practice 4 different elements of SSI, but also to realize the socioscientific issue as a complex cluster of different perspectives. However, in the activities where the learning objectives were to interpret and use COVID-19 related vocabulary and expressions and learn and express factual information, Korean was used more than English. For example, in this activity, by watching the video comparing 5 different masks, Students focused on learning different names of masks, describing how they're different in terms of their functions, inferring unknown Korean words based on the context, and responding to discussion questions regarding wearing masks in Korean. Students were asked to talk in Korean about the related issues using the words and expressions they learned in class. And the aim of the final project was to create a meme as a pair regarding COVID-19 and provide reasoning on their decision-making about multiple modes and messages they wanted to share through their memes. So as you can see in the project goals, we also brought the concept of multimodality to help students express their ideas more freely. Students also composed memes with native Korean speakers in mind as the audience, because we wanted to see how students reflected their cultural knowledge of the target community into their memes. And here are some of the creative memes that our students made. You can see how students used different text, images, and even fonts and different colors of the text and their placements to convey various messages regarding life with COVID-19. I want to explain all of them to you in detail, especially how students reflected their knowledge on both COVID-19 and cultures of the target community, but due to our limited time, I'll focus on just one meme. So please take a look at this meme. One of the common social cultural scenes in Korean society captured by the students was a conflict between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law as shown in this meme. This kind of situation where mother-in-law meddle in everything related to their sons and daughters-in-law is frequently depicted in South Korean media. The students who created this meme captured this social culture scene and situated in a pandemic situation, showing how the daughter-in-law in the meme naturally try to avoid her mother-in-law with the excuse of the 6 feet social distance. An interesting aspect of the assessment we used for this final project was peer feedback and voting of the people from the target group. After the students completed making their memes, they received feedback from their classmates regarding the design and messages of their work. Also, instructors asked more than 60 Koreans to vote and give comments on students' memes, which were shared with the students at the end of the project week. And it would also be nice if different types of feedback can be implemented at different stages of making memes so that students can revise and refine their works based on the feedback they received. Now let's look at case 3, which is eco-friendly travel.
Okay, let's talk about case 3 now. With the heavy situation of COVID-19 and even a project on that topic in the previous semester, students appreciated this topic of eco-friendly travel very much. Ironically, the project on travel to Korea, especially when we rarely travel, gave the students a breath of fresh air by giving an opportunity to envision trip to the place they have been yearning for. Introducing our most recent SSI project, I like to emphasize how students' L2 proficiency and SSI reasoning helped each other become more advanced through student samples. This project took place in Korean 202 classes during the 2021 spring semester. There were 2 classes of 19 and 23 students, and the most of them had SSI project experience in the previous semester. There were a total of 10 lessons at the end of the semester after the final exam. All course information was given through D2L, and the technology we used for this project was the internet, shared Google Slide for GroupWorks, Jamboard, and ThinkLink. We designed this project to explore socioscientific issues related to eco-friendly travel with our students. The learning objects were 1, plan a trip to Korea concerning eco-friendly factors. 2, create a digital travel brochure using ThinkLink. 3, understand various authentic materials related to environmental issues. 4, develop L2 language skills and strategies regarding environmental issues. And 5, raise awareness of the green benefits and apply scientific, moral reasoning to real-world situations. The project followed this roadmap so that the students can overview what they would need to do throughout the project week. We can get detailed lesson plans from the instructor's manual. I will give a brief overview of what we did in the class with this chart. On day 1, the students planned 4 days of the Korean tour as a group after watching travel videos and browsing brochures on Korean travel agencies. At this stage, the students were very excited and hopeful with their plans because they did not know the conditions we would add, such as rainy days, fine dust, and more. From the day 2 to 6, we learned SSI content such as weather, fine dust, eco-friendly travel tips, and carbon footprint. To incorporate these components and Korean skills, we created language activities such as watching authentic weather forecast, role play based on scenarios, and reading a webtoon. As the students' language skills improved compared to the previous semester, the instructors use more Korean in the class as an instructional tool as well as learning content. From day 7 to 10, students modified their original plans based on the knowledge they gained. I will explain the process in detail. Let's take a look at the student sample. This is a sample speaking activity where students choose one scenario to create a dialogue that includes at least 3 research findings from the previous lessons about fine dust. This activity provides an opportunity for students to apply their research findings to real-world situations, considering multiple factors in order to make decisions. This dialogue was sampled from the student discussion on the fine dust issue and its effect on their health, which is from the day 4 role-play activity.
아일랜드 씨 뉴스 봤어?
안 봤는데 무슨 일 있어?
응, 오늘 미세먼지가 심할 거라고 했어.
그게 왜 중요해?
미세먼지가 심각하면 숨쉬기 힘들어. 폐하고 목이 아플 거거든.
일반 먼지와 미세먼지가 어떻게 다르니?
모래보다 미세먼지가 더 작아가지고 위험해.
아, 물었어. 그럼 마스크 사러 가자. 마스크 쓰면 더 안전하대.
좋은 생각이다.
Okay, for the final project, students were expected to 1, create a 4-day digital eco-friendly travel brochure as a group using multiple modes and explaining how eco-friendly elements were applied. And 2, write a paragraph in Korean explaining what decision-making process has been taken to take an eco-friendly travel plan. We also gave our students a checklist for their project, including the amount of carbon emission reduction and tips and visual effects pertaining to eco-friendly travel. This is the modified travel plan with the places to go, activities, what to bring, and the reasoning behind the plans. Students critically re-examined their original travel plans that they created on day 1 and revised it to be eco-friendly. Students not only provide information on carbon emission on their plans, but also how they ended up with their reduction results. Through this activity, students could incorporate what they have learned in the green lifestyle and carbon footprint lessons to determine how to reduce their carbon footprints based on the different perspectives and opinions of each group member. These are the captures of the final project on ThinkLink. This is the title of Eco-Friendly Travel Plan, some visual elements showing eco-friendly travel, and this is a carbon footprint label. ThinkLink was an effective tool to show their understanding because they can embed multiple resources like videos and pictures, as well as text and simple images. Students also did a presentation using both Korean and English, showing their digital travel brochures and explaining how they could reduce carbon footprint. Let's watch a student presentation.
So in our reflection, we mentioned that 요즘 한국에서 미세먼지는 큰 문제예요. 탄소 배출이 너무 많아서 미세먼지가 많이 있어요. 그래서 미세먼지 is really bad for your body. As we all know, it's really bad for your heart as well as for your respiratory system. Therefore, in order to reduce these carbon emissions into the atmosphere, we are trying to do these eco-friendly travel and then decrease the amount of carbon footprints that we produce on the world. Therefore, a few of the ways, so 친환경 여행하는 방법은 음식 버리지 않기, don't throw away food, 일회용 물건 사용하지 않기, which is not to use disposable items, 텀블러 사용하기, which is to use tumblers instead of plastic bottles, and then 자가용 적게 타기, which is like don't use less of driving your own car and take more public transportation. So 우리가 함께 노력하면 지구의 환경을 좋아질 수 있어요, is our final statement.
Okay, this is a writing sample written in Korean, articulating the reasons how eco-friendly elements were applied in certain areas after group members had a discussion. To be honest, we weren't quite sure about the effectiveness of SSI for language classes when we started SSI project. However, we could observe that the students can demonstrate their ideas on their decision-making by considering multiple factors, constantly ask questions on how to make their trips more eco-friendly, and stayed skeptical to reach final decisions, which are all the critical processes of SSI in Korean in these reasoning paragraphs. In the assessment, multimodal, SSI contents, and language aspects were considered. The students gave feedback to each other on their presentation using the chatting feature on Zoom, and the instructor gave written feedback to refine their brochure. Okay, at this time, we'd like to pause and take 2 minutes to brainstorm how you can implement SSI topics into your classroom. Please use the link in the chat to go to our Padlet page and share your ideas. Okay, the questions are, how would you implement an SSI project or activities in your curriculum? And the second question is, what could be the possible challenges? Okay, yeah, we got some ideas. Eco-friendly travel seems to be a great idea that could be used in any language classroom. Possible challenges are planning in, where did it go? Let's keep moving. Planning in advance. Yes, it took a lot of time to plan. Yeah, but we had the same concerns when we start. Where did it go? Many of us not even good in science classes. It's keep moving. It's hard to follow. Yeah, science vocabulary. We are going to give a instructor manual, and you will see how we put all the vocabularies for the COVID-19. Yeah, probably the challenge can be accommodate individual students' interest in language classroom in, oh, where did it go? In the final project.
So
Yeah.
we have several questions. So I see many interesting responses to these questions. Yeah, it's very challenging. So before we move on to the next speaker, let's see the questions we have had so far. So the students who participated in this project is all the students, all the courses were 200 level. So they are like a low intermediate or high beginners. And then students like a class met 5 times per week. So it's a 5 credits. And also students, what is the role of each student? They work in groups. Sometimes students work together to research a topic with no specific role of each. Other times students took different roles such as a doctor, patient, and an interviewer, interviewees, and so on. For research on Western Eastern medicines, the students were grouped up based on their topic interest. And for COVID and eco-friendly, we divided the entire class into small groups, and then they worked as a group. So within their groups, they decide what roles each member will take. So that's how usually we do, and then we make it as a group project as much as possible. And one question I found interesting is, how Michelle Smith asked this question: how do you find time to do such a project when you have very strict restrictions to finish chapters? Yes, that's definitely a challenging part for language courses. So we tried to save the times for SSI project either at the end of the semester or every Friday as a part of a culture class. So we had to revise our curricula. For example, for a vocabulary, we usually, when we start each lesson, we used to go over vocabularies and then teachers explained those vocabularies. But we changed that part into self-study and then save the time. So those things at the end of the webinar, our instructors can answer in more detail. And another question, did you introduce new grammar structures for the unit, or did it utilize most of what was introduced in other units? Yes, so we usually integrated grammar structures that students have learned in their previous classes and the given class. And then instructors included those grammatical points and the vocabularies, so encouraged students to use them by including those grammatical points in project guidelines. Did you encounter any online translator used that supersede the vocabulary skills you are hoping students would learn? Any tips or thoughts? It's a question from the Tina. Yeah, Tina, the next presenter will address this because that was one of our concerns. And then we had to create a spin-off project because of this machine translation issue. Okay, I will hand over the baton to Jieun.
Hi, so before we introduce instructor resources we prepared for you, we would like to share one more SSI topic. Just like Sunyoung mentioned, as we implemented the curriculum, we had our own socio-scientific issue, that is students' use of online machine translator, such as Google Translate. During the projects, even after we primed students with necessary vocabulary and grammatical structures for the activities and presentations, as you saw from case 1 through case 3, we observed students increase translator usage when they worked with authentic materials on SS topic compared to the traditional classroom activities, such as workbook and textbook exercises. In particular, we observed this increased translator usage when they prepare their final project presentation. So we asked, surprisingly or not surprisingly, 100% of the students in the same class that we implemented case 2, COVID-19, had used translators. As you can see from here, translator was most commonly used as a dictionary for looking up unknown words. The students also used the translator to revise their Korean writing and for interpretive purposes, although it was not clear whether their attempts to revise or interpret Korean text using translator were successful or not. Our students often use a translator in hopes of making their writing process easier, such as looking up words or phrases they didn't know how to say in Korean off the top of their head. However, the outcomes were not always as accurate as they hoped, as you probably already noticed from your own students' writing. Using a translator for their benefit requires them to be able to judge whether the translated results are linguistically and pragmatically appropriate in the given context. Because our students were at the upper beginning and low intermediate level, their proficiency in Korean was not enough to make correct judgment most of the time. Thus, their sentences became pragmatically awkward. Considering the ubiquity of machine translators in our lives and students' heavy reliance on it, we thought we could make this as an SSI of our own as foreign language instructors. We reframed the translator as a resource or even a peer feedback that our students can use for their language learning instead of outright prohibiting it. This led us to develop guided use of machine translator or GUMT to assist our students in using a machine translator with a more analytical approach. So the GUMT project includes 3 main phases: instruction, practice, and feedback. First, the instructional session aimed to develop better awareness on how a machine translator can be an effective supplemental tool for writing. And there were 2 main parts: reviewing popular translator resources' strengths and weaknesses, and evaluating the pragmatic appropriateness of the translator outputs through pragmatic linguistic cues and other online resources such as image and news search. The first activity was to discuss strengths and limitations particular to both Google Translate and Naver Papago. They are the 2 main translators our students use the most. We provided examples such as different speech styles and level of politeness each translator uses, and in which genre each speech style would be more appropriate. Instructors also overviewed the 2 translator platforms and platforms' built-in features such as honorific functions, a word's part of speech display, and direct link to online dictionaries. We also demonstrated how students can use Google image search and news search to make socio-pragmatic judgments. Students search the expressions and words on Google and click the news and image tab from search results. By reviewing the search result, students can make decisions whether the translator outputs are appropriate in the given context. For example, for the image search, when the word letter is translated, the letter that you write and put it in an envelope, there are a couple of possibilities, including 편지 and 서한. 편지 is used more in modern daily life, while 서한 is used in more traditional and official settings. When each one was image searched, 편지 shows typical paper letter images, whereas images of formal letters written on letterhead were found when 서한 was searched. For the next activity, students did pragmatic and grammar evaluation exercises. Throughout the activity, students were encouraged to think about the context of the given samples when they reviewed the translated outputs. This was to select the pragmatically and grammatically appropriate translator results. The context included several factors, such as formal and informal setting, a relationship between the speaker and the listener, or the writer and the reader, and the purpose of the conversation or writing. Second, as the last part of the instructional session, and it overlaps with practice phase, students practice the use of a translator with their instructor first, and then with their peers in a small group. A table, which you will see in the next slide, was provided. It allows students to confirm translator results and to visualize their decision-making process. Then a self-reflection activity on their final decisions followed. Throughout the semester, students were given opportunities to apply the GUMT in their 5 writing assignments and to critically reflect on the use of a translator with the same worksheet. In each writing task, students first wrote a draft in Korean and then in English. From their first Korean draft, students selected words or expressions they needed help with and then used the translator for various purposes. Students revised and finalized their draft based on the translator's output and image usage. Lastly, written feedback was provided and in-class review sessions were held after each writing assignment. As students used GUMT, it became important for students to know they made the right decision so that their final draft is what they actually wanted to express. The feedback focused on how the students can use a machine translator more effectively, as well as grammar and pragmatic evaluation of their final draft. The sentences that still needed corrections in the students' final draft were highlighted by the instructors. And then students compared, refined, and revised the highlighted sentences from the written feedback during the in-class review sessions. After a semester of 5 writing assignments, students perceived that GUMT helped them to use a translator more effectively. We were also able to observe that our students were developing their own strategies for using a translator, as well as image search and news searches. Also, they were able to reflect on the drawbacks of using a translator as a lower level for a language learner. Students also thought that it helped them to see the language more critically and analytically, and they learned more pragmatically appropriate expressions. They were also able to use the translator outputs as automated feedback. Instructors' feedback was also perceived as valuable. They regarded it as enriching the explanations of cultural context in relation to their own writings. Through the feedback from the machine translator and instructors, students found reassurance and got validation that their writing was improving and going in the right direction. Some students were able to find their weak areas and were motivated to study more. The students also believed that they were able to be more fluent in writing in Korean in terms of length, creativity in content, and expressing their thoughts more freely. These 2 quotes pretty much sum up our students' experience with GUMT. Based on this presentation, I want you to think about your stance on the students' use of translator. We find machine translation is one of the most relevant socioscientific issues for language classes, as we believe SSI in language classrooms can enhance our students' critical reasoning and language learning. Our ad hoc spin-off SSI project of GUMT enabled us, language instructors and alto learners, to more critically engage in machine translators and benefit from them rather than hinder their language learning. If you want to incorporate GUMT in your language classes, we would like you to think about which part of our GUMT you would want to use in your classroom or you could use in your classroom, or what kind of activities you can create to guide your students. Now I will pass it back to Sojin. She's going to talk about the instructor's guide that we have available for you.
Okay, while you're listening to this presentation, you might think SSI is such an important topic and it would be nice to implement it in my language class, but it might not be easy to develop all the lesson plans and find necessary materials, right? Well, that's why we decided to make instructor manuals and gather all the materials and share them with you. There are instructor manuals for 2 different topics, life with COVID-19 and eco-friendly travel. In the manuals, we put detailed daily lesson plans, instructions for the activities, and supplementary resources such as websites, articles, student samples, and some of the images we used in class. We also included everything as a form of lesson plans so that teachers who look through the manuals can get a clear idea of how the 2 different curriculums were actually implemented in class. As you can see on this slide, we included what the activity was, whether it was a whole class or a breakout room group activity, and detailed instructions for the activities and extra resources as well. We not only included lesson plans, but also how the students actually did the activities with student samples. And we also included the worksheets that we used each day, which you can also download if you need. And PowerPoint slides that we used in class to help you understand how the classes were actually taught. So please feel free to check our instructor manuals on the Circle website, look at the materials, use the parts that you need, and it would also be nice if you could share your ideas and experiences with us in the future.
Now it's time to introduce SSI Discourses Archiving. As the first year of the project mission, we designed the archive of the contemporary discourses of social-scientific issues in Korea. We researched SSI relevant narratives in media as a first approach to SSI, so as to explore SSI topics and have a sense of which would fit in to classrooms. Fundamentally, the media is a good source of pop culture as well as social issues and scientific issues as well. Not always, but frequently, the beginning of the L2 learning or L2 contact is happening via pop culture. Do you know K-pop? A question like, do you know GUMT? Pop culture can be a starting point of one's attraction or curiosity. As such, it's plausible that people consume or are naturally exposed to social scientific issues through media. That is a vehicle of pop culture with less pressure, but more pleasure. This research for archiving helped us to initiate the 3 project curriculums that we've introduced previously. This archive we opened is a sample of a case of Korean. So teachers joined us today can also have their own archives targeting diverse communities and languages. The format of the archive will be applicable to the cases of other languages in a way that collects and stores resources on the categories and uses them in the class as authentic materials. I'll give some instructions about the features of the archive and how to use it. Regarding narratives presented in media, we wondered how people are aware of and interpreting scientific issues in their lives, how social scientific issues are described in narratives, and how social scientific knowledge is manifested in daily life. With these questions, we collected SSI content of various modes, such as movies, TV shows, webtoons, and songs. Although it's not presented in the current version of the archive, we also consider the forms of word of mouth, video clips such as vlogs, and written text, including blogs and web forums, as well as images, including memes. Here is a sample of webtoons from the archive. It's about a man's story on the moon who was left alone after losing the Earth. And I put the lyrics of the song titled #1, sung by BoA, B-O-A, we can see how the moon and its features and are described in a girl's narrative who just broke with her partner. Yeah, you may have the time to close a look at these and others on the archive website after the webinar. We applied theme-based organization to build up the site. For now, it has the 8 themes. Relevant content is placed under the themes. From the top, traditional science, biohazard biotechnology, space, technologies new and old, environment, energy, disasters, apocalypse, marine resources, deep sea, and time. The archives is featured with linked content with hashtags, a keyword search tool, brief introductions on each item, and some translations of lyrics. This is the screenshot of the main archive page. You will be able to find the narratives of how scientific issues are aware of and interpreted in a community, the ways of how, the ways in which social scientific issues are described in narratives, and the observations of social scientific knowledge that are manifested in daily life. Please check the chat window and have the link. Hopefully, this archive is helpful for your brainstorming about what to collect, how to organize, and how to use SSI content in your classes. Thank you.
Thank you to our team for the great presentation, and thank you all for joining us and being such engaging participants today. And we have about 10 minutes left for the Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A menu, then we'll address right away by order. I know we covered all very well, so you don't have any question left. And then we also even shared the 106 page of instructor manual. So you have good references, and then you can totally build your own SSI project in your classroom.
Can I ask you all a question related to that? Because you've touched upon it a couple of times, but what would be a couple of your main tips for the rest of us if we're working in other languages to get started with something like this, other than starting with your materials that you've shared, of course?
Who would like to answer this question? Okay, so let me start, and then we are all like, we can answer from very different perspectives to these questions. So for me, when I because I'm not language specialist, so I have to find someone that can feel like a part I can't do. So that's why we created a team. So that's why you are here, because you are specialized in something, but you need to learn something more. So that's why we are here to help you as a team. We are your team from now on. And then, so another thing, so science, STEM issues are very difficult to even in science classrooms, right? And then bringing it into language classrooms. So at the beginning, students were, oh, this COVID-19 is so stressful, and then we have to do this in our language classroom. And then so before, students enjoyed the culture Friday, so they talk about Korean popular music and those fun things, and all of a sudden we changed it into socio-scientific issues. But there are if you make it more relevant for their lives, and then use the kind of materials our main project students then they started thinking, oh, this is not bad, and then these issues are very important, then our students care about those important social issues. And then when they have limit to like a proficiency level, then let them like discuss in English too. Then they enhance their like they have good discussions. Then those discussions motivate our students to learn more about how to say these ideas in Korean. And yeah, so those two like help each other. Like scientific issues very complicated, and then help students to explore their Korean learning more advanced level, and then Korean as their environment. That makes these scientific issues more special because they are interested in Korean culture, and then they deal with the SSI in Korean context as well as their home culture. In terms of STEM education, Young-Hae, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I think I saw in the Padlet response, instructor and students should interesting in the project. That comments kind of reminded me when we started this project, I could feel the resistance from students, also instructors as well. Yeah, but yeah, as a science educator, I think I wanted to integrate this SSI at any level, at any class, but yeah, to raise scientifically literate citizens in United States. But also I could see, but I can witness, I could see the evolution of these teachers thinking about the issues using this kind of four components I presented in this SSI components: complexity, multiple factors, and kind of having skepticism, and so on, and multiple perspectives. I could see really active engagement, and the students as the semester goes and as the semesters continued, I could see the evolutions much. So I'm glad to share this happened. Yeah.
We have several questions in Q&A session. So first question to Seojin: where can we find your so it's a personal thing. So dissertation product, once it's finished, it sounds fascinating. I know. So yeah, so Seojin will answer that question on Q&A section. And what SSI issues are you going to explore in the fall of 2021? We are debating whether we are going to do the aftermath of COVID-19 or going back to our Western Eastern medicine. And what SSI issues are, so that's questions. Yeah, those questions. So I would like to go back to Chantal's question, and then I think Jieun can add more comments as a language pedagogy specialist.
So Sunyoung and Yang already give wonderful ideas, but I would like to reiterate what Seungmin said from the case one. I mean, that could be the starting point if you want to implement this in your class. So the first suggestion was find a topic, relevant topic from your textbook, so that your students are not thrown off by these scientific topics and they find it relevant because it's in their textbook. And then if it's in textbook, your textbook should have some basic vocabularies and some grammatical structures that you can use to form the project. So your textbook is always the starting point. And then again, I'm just reiterating Seungmin's point that you can decide how much SSI components from you want to include in your project or your presentation in your classroom. So as you can see from case one, it was weekly project. So in each week, during the Monday through Thursday, we went over the textbook, and then there were the grammar points here and there that we can pull it into our project, such as giving directions or explaining their symptoms, like health symptoms in doctor's office. So I know it sounds boring, but go with your textbook. That could be the starting point.
I think that's one of the things that I've really appreciated about this project and hearing you all talk about it today is that you made it really accessible for people. So you can start small with the things that are related to your textbook, or you can develop a larger project across a curriculum. And we got to see both of those different levels, which I think is really helpful. And then also seeing that connection, the way you made it so personally relevant, but then also led the students into these bigger societal issues and critical thinking around them that goes far beyond the language classroom as well. I think that's really powerful. I'm seeing lots of people offering their words of praises in the chat, and we'll make sure that the presenters get a copy of that because they may not have been able to see all of them. But I definitely know we at Circle share in this. We've been really excited about this project and are so happy to get you all able to present about it today. I know people have already seen the poll. We also will be sending a more open-ended as an email feedback form, and that's so that we can offer that to the presenters for their ongoing work, but also so that you can give us ideas about what other kinds of workshops that you'd like to see. Oh, we do have a couple more questions that popped up that we can maybe take quickly. Oh, some word of thanks. And then is there a place where people can find details about the project on Eastern and Western medicine?
I think Seungmin can answer that question. Because it was our pilot project, we didn't include instructor manual on that topic, but Seungmin was in charge of the topic. So if you contact Seungmin, I think he will be happy to share our materials. Seungmin, you want to add it more?
Yeah, I can have to share. Yeah, I'm very happy about that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving us this wonderful set of resources, which you all now have the link for, and for sharing your work with us today as part of this webinar. So I know the rest of the participants can't unmute themselves and are expressing their praises there in the chat, but I'm going to applaud on behalf of all of us because this has been a really wonderful webinar. So thank you all for presenting, and we look forward to seeing your work in the article that you've mentioned, in the dissertations that you're working on, and the other work that is to come. And we hope to see many of you in our fall webinars. Have a great summer, everybody.
Have a great summer. Don't forget, we are your team from now on.
Thank you.